The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Marcus Aurelius. They tell you pressure makes diamonds. They lie. Pressure crushes more than it creates. It reveals the flaws already present, magnifies the cracks in your foundation. The world admires the diamond but ignores the coal dust and shattered hopes left in its wake. We are not concerned with comforting illusions. We dissect the anatomy of failure, the precise moment when resilience buckles. We observe the architecture of minds fracturing under duress, because understanding that breaking point is the key to fortifying your own. The herd believes in platitudes, in the myth of inevitable triumph. We see the battlefield for what it is, a grinder of wills, a crucible where only the ruthlessly prepared survive. Pressure is not a test of potential, it is an accelerant of reality. It exposes the untrained, the unprepared, the fundamentally weak. While they repeat their mantras of positive thinking, we analyze the stress points, the vulnerabilities that pressure will exploit. We understand that true strength is not about resisting pressure, but about channeling it, about knowing exactly where to yield and when to strike back with calculated force. The difference between a tool and a weapon is control. Pressure uncontrolled destroys. Pressure mastered elevates. Learn to discern the difference, and you learn to command your destiny. Others preach resilience as some innate quality, a lucky draw in the genetic lottery. We recognize it as a skill, honed through deliberate exposure, through carefully calibrated doses of adversity. Like a muscle, the mind adapts to increasing resistance, but only with the right training. Throw a novice into the deep end and they drown. Guide them through incremental challenges, and they emerge stronger, more capable, more sovereign. The world throws pressure indiscriminately. Our purpose is to equip you to meet it, not with blind faith, but with cold, calculating competence. The human mind, when subjected to intense and prolonged pressure, doesn't simply bend. It undergoes a radical transformation, often shattering into fragments of its former self. This fragmentation isn't a linear process, but a complex cascade of cognitive and emotional breakdowns. Memory falters, focus dissipates, and the ability to make rational decisions degrades. The individual becomes a liability, both to themselves and to those around them. Consider the high-stakes world of espionage, where agents are deliberately subjected to psychological manipulation and sensory deprivation. Their handlers understand that consistent pressure, meticulously applied, can erode even the most steadfast resolve. They target not only the agent's conscious mind, but also their subconscious vulnerabilities, preying on fears, insecurities, and past traumas to dismantle their sense of self. The goal is not simply to extract information, but to rewrite the individual's internal narrative, turning them into a tool of manipulation. This process highlights a crucial distinction. Pressure doesn't merely reveal weaknesses, it amplifies them, turning minor flaws into catastrophic failures. The executive facing a hostile takeover, the surgeon performing a life-or-death operation, the soldier on the front lines, all are subjected to immense pressure, and their responses are shaped by their underlying psychological makeup. A pre-existing tendency towards anxiety can morph into debilitating panic. A latent inclination towards aggression can erupt into uncontrolled rage. The key to understanding this phenomenon lies in recognizing the mind's limited capacity for handling stress. When the demands placed upon it exceed its resources, it begins to triage, sacrificing non-essential functions to maintain core operations. This can manifest as a detachment from reality, a sense of emotional numbness, or a narrowing of focus that blinds the individual to alternative solutions. The danger lies in the fact that these coping mechanisms, while initially adaptive, can become self-destructive in the long run. The detached executive may make ruthless decisions that alienate their allies. The numb surgeon may become desensitized to the value of human life. The tunnel-visioned soldier may walk blindly into an ambush. Therefore, true mastery under pressure requires not only the ability to withstand stress, but also the awareness to recognize its distorting effects. It demands a metacognitive understanding of one's own vulnerabilities and the strategies to mitigate them. Think of a diamond. formed under immense pressure, but also carefully controlled heat. The control is key. Without it, all you have is coal. We are not born with innate resilience. We cultivate it through deliberate practice, through repeated exposure to controlled stressors that challenge our limits without overwhelming our capacity. This is the essence of psychological hardening, a process of gradually increasing the mind's tolerance for pressure, building up its defenses against cognitive and emotional breakdown. However, this process is not without its risks. Excessive or poorly managed exposure to stress can lead to burnout, a state of chronic exhaustion and cynicism that renders the individual incapable of effective action. The key is to find the optimal balance between challenge and recovery, pushing oneself to the edge of one's limits without falling over the precipice. This requires a deep understanding of one's own psychological needs, one's stress triggers, and one's preferred coping mechanisms. It also requires a willingness to seek feedback from others, to learn from one's mistakes, and to adapt one's strategies as circumstances change. The individual who masters this process becomes not only more resilient but also more adaptable, more creative, and more capable of thriving in the face of adversity. They learn to harness the energy of pressure, to channel it into productive action, and to use it as a catalyst for growth. The world preaches the myth of inherent talent. We teach the art of deliberate construction. Pressure is the architect and you are the engineer. You decide what is built. Imagine a high-stakes poker game, not the sanitized version on television but a backroom affair, thick with smoke and unspoken threats, where fortunes are won and lost on a single hand. Picture a seasoned player, let's call him Anton, facing down a younger, more aggressive opponent named Marco. The pot is enormous, representing weeks, perhaps months, of careful planning and risk assessment. Anton's face is impassive, a mask honed over years of deception and calculated indifference. Inside, however, his mind is a whirlwind of calculations. He's analyzing Marco's betting patterns, his microexpression, the almost imperceptible tremor in his hand as he placed his chips. He's considering the odds, the potential payouts, and the devastating consequences of a wrong decision. Marco, sensing weakness, leans forward, his eyes glinting with predatory confidence. He throws down a pile of chips, an audacious raise designed to intimidate. He speaks, his voice dripping with condescension, attempting to unsettle Anton to force a mistake. This is the pressure point. This is the moment where Anton's psychological hardening will be tested. A lesser player would crumble, succumbing to the fear of loss or the desire to prove himself. They might make a rash call, driven by ego rather than reason, and watch their fortune evaporate before their eyes. Anton, however, remains unmoved. He takes a slow, deliberate breath, controlling his heart rate, silencing the internal chatter of doubt and anxiety. He focuses on the objective reality of the situation, separating the facts from the emotional noise. He reviews his initial assessment of Marco's playing style, his tells, the subtle clues that betray his true intentions. He considers the possibility that Marco is bluffing, that his aggression is a calculated performance designed to mask a weak hand. He also considers the possibility that Marco is holding a monster, that he is walking into a trap. But regardless of the outcome, Anton knows that he must make a decision based on logic and reason, not on fear or pride. He calmly calls the raise, meeting Marco's aggression with an unwavering gaze. The cards are revealed. Marco's bluff is exposed. Anton wins the pot, not through luck, but through mastery of his own mind. This scenario exemplifies the crucial role of psychological hardening in high-pressure situations. Anton's ability to remain calm, focused, and rational under intense scrutiny is a direct result of his deliberate cultivation of mental resilience. He has trained himself to withstand the psychological assaults of his opponents, to filter out the distractions and emotional impulses that would otherwise cloud his judgment. He has learned to embrace the pressure, to use it as a tool for sharpening his focus and enhancing his decision-making abilities. This is not a talent, it's a skill. It is the result of countless hours spent studying the game, analyzing his own mistakes, and deliberately exposing himself to stressful situations in order to build his tolerance for adversity. He understands that the mind, like any muscle, must be challenged and stressed in order to grow stronger. He actively seeks out opportunities to push his limits, to test his resilience, and to refine his mental game. The backroom poker game is simply a microcosm of the larger world, an arena where the principles of psychological hardening are constantly in play. In business, in relationships, in any endeavor that involves risk and uncertainty, the ability to manage pressure is a critical determinant of success. The individual who has cultivated mental resilience is better equipped to navigate the inevitable challenges and setbacks that life throws their way. They are less likely to succumb to stress-induced errors in judgment, more likely to maintain their composure in the face of adversity, and more likely to emerge from difficult situations stronger and more capable than before. The world is full of Marcos. Learn from Anton. The trap is sprung when the mind, unprepared for the crushing weight of consequence, buckles. Consider the executive facing a hostile takeover. Years of careful planning, strategic alliances, and relentless ambition have culminated in this moment. He has built an empire, a legacy he believes is unassailable. But now the vultures circle. They whisper doubts, spread rumors, and exploit vulnerabilities he never knew existed. The pressure mounts. Sleep becomes a luxury. Every phone call, every meeting, every news headline is a potential landmine. His carefully constructed facade of control begins to crack. He snaps at his staff, second-guesses his decisions, and isolates himself from his allies. The weight is too great. He begins to make mistakes, errors in judgment born of desperation and fear. He trusts the wrong advisors, dismisses crucial warnings, and compromises his principles in a desperate attempt to salvage his position. The takeover succeeds. His empire crumbles. He is left with nothing but the bitter taste of failure, a testament to the fragility of a mind unprepared for the abyss. Think of the athlete in the Olympic final. Years of grueling training, sacrifice, and unwavering dedication have led to this single moment. The stadium roars, the cameras flash, and the weight of a nation rests upon their shoulders. They step onto the starting line, their heart pounding in their chest, their muscles tense with anticipation. But beneath the surface, a subtle shift occurs. Doubt creeps in. What if they stumble? What if they fail to live up to expectations? The pressure intensifies, constricting their breath, clouding their focus. The gun fires. They surge forward, but their movements are stiff, unnatural. They falter, losing precious milliseconds. They see their rivals pulling ahead, their dreams slipping away. Panic sets in. They push harder, straining beyond their limits, but their body betrays them. They cramp, they stumble, they fall. They cross the finish line in last place, their face etched with disappointment and regret. The weight of the moment has crushed them, revealing the vulnerability beneath their physical prowess. Observe the gambler in a high-stakes game. He has ridden a wave of luck, accumulating a fortune beyond his wildest dreams. He feels invincible, untouchable. He increases his bets, taking risks he would never have considered before. He ignores the warning signs, the subtle shifts in his opponent's behavior, the growing unease in his own gut. The pressure mounts. He loses a hand, then another and another. His confidence begins to wane. He doubles down, hoping to recoup his losses, but only digs himself deeper into the hole. He becomes reckless, impulsive, driven by a desperate need to regain control. He bets everything on a single hand, a foolish gamble that seals his fate. He loses. His fortune vanishes in an instant. He is left with nothing but the crushing realization of his own folly, a victim of his own hubris and the unforgiving nature of chance. Consider the politician facing a scandal. Years of carefully cultivated image, public trust, and unwavering support are threatened by a single act of indiscretion. The media descends, the accusations fly, and the public turns against them. The pressure is immense. They try to deny the allegations, to deflect the blame, to spin the narrative in their favor. But the truth is relentless, like a persistent tide eroding their defenses. They become desperate, lashing out at their accusers, attacking their allies, and making increasingly erratic decisions. Their carefully constructed facade crumbles, revealing the flaws and contradictions beneath. Their career implodes, their reputation is shattered, and their legacy is tarnished forever. The weight of their actions has crushed them, exposing the emptiness behind their ambition. The pattern is consistent. An individual unprepared for the intensity of the situation succumbs to the pressure and makes catastrophic errors in judgment. They become reactive rather than proactive, driven by fear and desperation rather than reason and strategy. Their focus narrows, their perspective shrinks, and their ability to think clearly diminishes. They lose sight of their goals, abandon their principles, and compromise their integrity. The trap is not a physical barrier, but a mental one. It is the failure to cultivate the resilience, the discipline, and the self-awareness necessary to withstand the psychological assaults of high-pressure situations. It is the inability to maintain composure, to think clearly, and to act decisively in the face of adversity. The weak fail because they are not prepared to endure. Their minds are fragile, their spirits are brittle, and their resolve crumbles under the weight of expectation. They are victims of their own vulnerability, trapped by their own limitations. Those who collapse under pressure reveal a fundamental lack of preparation. They haven't visualized potential failure. They haven't wargamed scenarios where everything goes wrong. They haven't built the mental calluses necessary to withstand the emotional and psychological impact of high-stakes situations. They operate under the illusion of control, believing that their skills and intellect alone will be sufficient to overcome any challenge. But pressure exposes the fallacy of this belief. It reveals the gaps in their preparation, the weaknesses in their mental armor, and the limits of their ability to cope. They become overwhelmed by the complexity of the situation, paralyzed by fear, and unable to make sound decisions. Their minds become their own worst enemies, sabotaging their efforts and leading them down a path of self-destruction. The failure is not a matter of chance, but a consequence of inadequate preparation and a lack of mental fortitude. The Machiavellian approach to navigating minds under pressure begins with ruthless self-assessment. It is not enough to merely acknowledge one's weaknesses. One must dissect them with surgical precision, identifying the precise vulnerabilities that pressure exploits. This requires a level of honesty that few possess, a willingness to confront the uncomfortable truths about one's own limitations and insecurities. The man of ambition must recognize that his strengths are merely resources to be deployed, while his weaknesses are liabilities to be mitigated. He must understand that pressure amplifies both, and that a single point of failure can bring down an entire edifice of competence. Therefore, he must become his own most merciless critic, relentlessly probing for cracks in his mental armor and devising strategies to shore them up. This is not an exercise in self-pity or self-doubt, but a cold, calculated assessment of risk, a strategic evaluation of one's own capabilities and vulnerabilities. Only through such rigorous self-examination can one hope to anticipate and neutralize the psychological attacks that pressure unleashes. The next step is to cultivate a detached perspective, an ability to observe one's own thoughts and emotions with clinical objectivity. Pressure thrives on emotional reactivity, on the tendency to become consumed by fear, anxiety, or frustration. The Machiavellian strategist understands that these emotions are merely data points, signals to be interpreted and acted upon, not forces to be controlled by. He trains himself to recognize the onset of these feelings, to acknowledge their presence without allowing them to dictate his actions. He becomes a dispassionate observer of his own internal state, analyzing the physiological and psychological symptoms of stress with the same cold detachment that a physician might diagnose a disease. This requires a deliberate effort to cultivate emotional distance, to create a buffer between oneself and the emotional maelstrom of the situation. It is an exercise in self-mastery, a conscious attempt to wrest control from the impulsive, reactive parts of the brain and place it firmly in the hands of reason and strategy. Furthermore, the astute operator understands the power of calculated indifference. The man who visibly craves success, who desperately seeks approval, becomes a puppet dancing on the strings of external validation. His opponents can exploit his insecurities, manipulating his actions by withholding praise or threatening to withdraw their support. The Machiavellian, on the other hand, cultivates an air of detached self-sufficiency. He does not seek validation from others. His sense of worth is derived from his own internal standards of excellence. He is not immune to criticism, but he does not allow it to define him. He listens to feedback, analyzes its validity, and incorporates it into his strategies, but he does not allow it to shake his confidence or undermine his resolve. This indifference is not arrogance, but a calculated defense against manipulation. It is a shield that protects him from the emotional barbs of his rivals, allowing him to maintain his composure and focus on his objectives. The Machiavellian also recognizes the utility of controlled anxiety. While unchecked fear can be paralyzing, a moderate level of anxiety can be a powerful motivator. It can sharpen the senses, heighten awareness, and drive one to prepare more thoroughly and execute more precisely. The key is to manage this anxiety, to channel it into productive action rather than allowing it to consume one's thoughts. This requires a conscious effort to reframe the situation, to view pressure not as a threat but as an opportunity. The Machiavellian embraces the challenge, relishing the chance to test his skills and prove his mettle. He understands that pressure is the crucible in which greatness is forged, and that only those who can withstand its heat will emerge stronger and more resilient. He uses anxiety as a fuel, driving himself to exceed his own expectations and surpass the limitations of his rivals. Finally, the successful manipulator understands the importance of projecting an image of unwavering confidence. Even when beset by doubts and anxieties, he maintains a calm and composed demeanor. He speaks with authority, moves with purpose, and exudes an aura of control. This is not mere theatricality, but a strategic tool for influencing the perceptions of others. People are drawn to confidence, and they are more likely to trust and follow those who appear to be in command of the situation. By projecting an image of unwavering resolve, the Machiavellian can inspire confidence in his allies, intimidate his rivals, and create a self-fulfilling prophecy of success. This requires a mastery of body language, a control over facial expressions, and a deliberate modulation of tone of voice. It is an art of deception, a calculated manipulation of appearances designed to influence the behavior of others. The Machiavellian understands that perception is reality, and that the ability to shape the perceptions of others is a crucial weapon in the struggle for power. Consider the Roman Empire, a civilization forged in the fires of constant warfare and political intrigue. Its leaders, from Caesar to Augustus, were masters of navigating intense pressure, both internal and external. The legions faced relentless threats on every border, from the Germanic tribes in the north to the Parthian Empire in the east. Each campaign demanded meticulous planning, unwavering discipline, and the ability to adapt to unpredictable circumstances. A single miscalculation, a moment of hesitation, could spell disaster for an entire army and potentially for the empire itself. The weight of this responsibility bore down heavily on the shoulders of the generals. They were not merely strategists, but also politicians, diplomats, and often executioners. Their decisions had far-reaching consequences, shaping the fate of nations and the lives of millions. The pressure to succeed was immense, fueled by the ambitions of emperors, the expectations of the Roman people, and the ever-present threat of betrayal from within the ranks. To crumble under this strain was to invite ruin, not only for oneself, but also for the legions under one's command. The pressure within Rome itself was no less intense. The Senate, a viper's nest of competing factions and personal rivalries, was a constant source of instability. Senators plotted and schemed, vying for power and influence. Alliances were forged and broken with ruthless efficiency. Accusations of treason, conspiracy, and corruption were commonplace. The political arena was a battlefield where words were weapons and reputations were shields. To survive in this environment required a keen understanding of human nature, a mastery of rhetoric, and an ability to anticipate the moves of one's opponents. A single misstep, a careless remark, could be seized upon by enemies and used to devastating effect. The pressure to maintain one's position, to outmaneuver rivals, and to stay one step ahead of the game was relentless. Those who succumbed to complacency or naivete were quickly swept aside, their ambitions crushed beneath the weight of political machinations. The leaders of Rome understood that pressure was an inherent part of their existence. They did not seek to avoid it, but rather to master it. They developed strategies for managing stress, maintaining composure, and making sound decisions under duress. They cultivated a sense of inner resilience, a belief in their own abilities, and a willingness to take calculated risks. They understood that fear was a natural emotion, but that it could not be allowed to paralyze them. They learned to channel their anxiety into productive action, using it as a catalyst for focus and determination. They sought counsel from trusted advisors, but ultimately, they bore the burden of responsibility alone. They understood that the fate of the empire rested upon their shoulders, and that they could not afford to falter. This is not to say that they were immune to the effects of stress. Many Roman leaders suffered from anxiety, depression, and other mental health issues. But they learned to manage their conditions, to conceal their vulnerabilities, and to project an image of unwavering strength. They understood that perception was paramount, and that even a hint of weakness could be exploited by their enemies. Consider the Punic Wars, where Rome faced near annihilation at the hands of Hannibal. The Roman legions suffered devastating defeats at Cannae and Trebia, and the city of Rome itself was threatened with capture. The pressure on the Roman leadership was immense. The Senate was paralyzed by fear and indecision, and the people were clamoring for peace. Yet, in the face of such adversity, the Romans refused to surrender. They rallied their forces, appointed new generals, and adopted new strategies. They understood that the only way to survive was to fight, and they fought with a ferocity and determination that surprised even their enemies. Ultimately, they triumphed over Hannibal, securing their dominance in the Mediterranean and laying the foundation for their future empire. This victory was not achieved through luck or chance, but through a combination of strategic planning, unwavering resolve, and the ability to withstand immense pressure. The Roman leaders understood that victory required sacrifice, and they were willing to make whatever sacrifices were necessary to achieve their goals. They understood that the fate of Rome depended upon their actions, and they refused to let fear or doubt deter them from their duty. Even in moments of apparent tranquility, the pressure never truly subsided. The vastness of the empire presented its own unique challenges. Maintaining control over such a vast territory required a complex bureaucracy, a strong military presence, and a constant vigilance against rebellion and corruption. The emperors were constantly bombarded with demands from all corners of the empire, from petitions for aid to reports of unrest. They had to balance the needs of different regions, appease powerful interest groups, and navigate the treacherous waters of court politics. The pressure to maintain order, to ensure stability, and to preserve the unity of the empire was unrelenting. Those who failed to meet these challenges were quickly overthrown, often through violent means. The history of the Roman Empire is littered with the corpses of emperors who succumbed to the pressures of power. To survive as emperor required not only competence and intelligence, but also a certain ruthlessness, a willingness to make difficult decisions, and an ability to inspire both fear and respect. The capacity to operate effectively with minds under pressure stems from a neurological architecture sculpted by both genetics and experience. The prefrontal cortex, the brain's executive control center, plays a crucial role in regulating emotions, planning, and decision-making. Under stress, the amygdala, the brain's fear center, can hijack the prefrontal cortex, leading to impulsive reactions and impaired judgment. However, individuals who have developed robust coping mechanisms can maintain prefrontal cortex dominance even in the face of intense pressure. This requires conscious effort, training, and a deep understanding of one's own cognitive and emotional vulnerabilities. Techniques such as mindfulness meditation, cognitive reappraisal, and exposure therapy can help strengthen the prefrontal cortex and reduce the amygdala's influence. Furthermore, the neurochemical environment of the brain is significantly altered under pressure. Cortisol, the stress hormone, is released in response to perceived threats, triggering a cascade of physiological changes designed to enhance survival. While cortisol can be beneficial in the short term, chronic exposure to elevated levels can have detrimental effects on cognitive function, memory, and overall mental health. Therefore, effective pressure management involves not only controlling emotional responses, but also mitigating the negative effects of cortisol. This can be achieved through regular exercise, a healthy diet, and sufficient sleep. The psychology of high-pressure performance is further complicated by the phenomenon of choking. Choking occurs when individuals, under intense scrutiny, experience a sudden and inexplicable decline in performance. This is often attributed to an overemphasis on conscious control, disrupting the automatic execution of well-learned skills. In essence, the individual becomes too aware of their own movements and thoughts, interfering with the smooth flow of action. To prevent choking, it is essential to develop a high degree of automaticity in the relevant skills. This requires extensive practice and repetition, to the point where the skills become ingrained in muscle memory. Additionally, individuals can employ strategies to reduce anxiety and self-consciousness, such as focusing on process goals rather than outcome goals, or using pre-performance routines to create a sense of predictability and control. The ability to compartmentalize is also critical. Separating the immediate task from the broader implications of success or failure can reduce the perceived pressure and allow the individual to focus on the present moment. This requires a mental discipline that can be cultivated through practice and self-awareness. The social dimension of pressure cannot be ignored. Humans are inherently social creatures, and our performance is often influenced by the expectations and judgments of others. Social pressure can be a powerful motivator, driving individuals to achieve more than they thought possible. However, it can also be a source of anxiety and self-doubt, leading to underperformance. Understanding the dynamics of social pressure is crucial for navigating high-stakes situations. This involves recognizing the different types of social influence, such as normative influence, the desire to conform to social norms, and informational influence, the reliance on others for information. It also requires developing the ability to resist undue pressure and to assert one's own autonomy. Furthermore, individuals can leverage social support to mitigate the negative effects of pressure. Building strong relationships with trusted colleagues, mentors, and friends can provide a buffer against stress and anxiety. Seeking advice and feedback from others can also help to improve performance and to gain a more objective perspective on one's own strengths and weaknesses. The ability to build and maintain social connections is therefore an essential component of pressure management. The concept of grit is also relevant to understanding how individuals cope with pressure. Grit is defined as perseverance and passion for long-term goals. It involves a combination of resilience, determination, and a growth mindset. Individuals with high levels of grit are more likely to persist in the face of challenges, to learn from their mistakes, and to view setbacks as opportunities for growth. Grit is not simply about being tough or stubborn. It is about having a deep sense of purpose and a commitment to achieving one's goals, even when the going gets tough. Cultivating grit requires a conscious effort to develop a growth mindset, to embrace challenges, and to learn from failures. It also involves setting realistic goals, breaking them down into smaller, manageable steps, and celebrating small victories along the way. Furthermore, individuals can cultivate grit by seeking out challenging experiences, by learning from role models who have demonstrated resilience, and by surrounding themselves with supportive individuals who believe in their potential. The development of grit is a lifelong process, but it is an essential ingredient for success in any field. Strategic foresight plays a vital role in minimizing the impact of pressure. Proactive planning and risk assessment can significantly reduce the likelihood of unexpected crises and allow individuals to anticipate potential challenges. This involves developing a deep understanding of the environment in which one is operating, identifying potential threats and opportunities, and formulating contingency plans to address various scenarios. Strategic foresight is not about predicting the future with certainty. It is about preparing for a range of possible outcomes and developing the flexibility to adapt to changing circumstances. This requires a combination of analytical skills, creative thinking, and a willingness to challenge assumptions. Furthermore, effective strategic foresight involves seeking out diverse perspectives, consulting with experts, and engaging in scenario planning exercises. By anticipating potential challenges and developing proactive strategies, individuals can reduce the level of uncertainty and control the narratives, thereby minimizing the pressure they experience. The proactive stance reduces the feeling of helplessness, which is a major contributor to pressure-induced anxiety. The ability to control one's attention is also paramount. In high-pressure situations, distractions abound, and the mind can easily wander to irrelevant thoughts and worries. Training the mind to focus on the task at hand is essential for maintaining composure and performing effectively. This can be achieved through mindfulness practices, such as meditation and focused breathing. Mindfulness involves paying attention to the present moment without judgment, allowing thoughts and feelings to arise and pass without getting carried away by them. Regular mindfulness practice can strengthen the attentional control network in the brain, making it easier to focus on the task at hand and to ignore distractions. Additionally, individuals can employ techniques to reduce the impact of negative thoughts and emotions, such as cognitive diffusion. Cognitive diffusion involves creating distance between oneself and one's thoughts, recognizing that thoughts are just thoughts, not necessarily facts. This can help to reduce the power of negative thoughts and to prevent them from interfering with performance. The trained mind is a resilient mind. The physiological response to pressure can be modulated through techniques such as deep breathing exercises and progressive muscle relaxation. These techniques activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which counteracts the fight-or-flight response and promotes relaxation. Deep breathing exercises involve slowing down the breath and focusing on the sensation of breathing. This can help to lower heart rate, blood pressure, and muscle tension. Progressive muscle relaxation involves tensing and releasing different muscle groups throughout the body, promoting a sense of physical relaxation. Regular practice of these techniques can help to reduce the body's overall level of stress and to improve its ability to cope with pressure. Furthermore, individuals can employ other physiological strategies, such as getting enough sleep, eating a healthy diet, and avoiding excessive caffeine and alcohol. These lifestyle factors can significantly impact the body's ability to handle stress and to perform at its best. By optimizing their physiology, individuals can enhance their resilience and improve their capacity to operate under pressure. Ultimately, mastering one's internal state is the foundation upon which external achievements are built. The truly sovereign mind understands that pressure is not an external force, but an internal interpretation. It is the meaning we assign to events, not the events themselves, that dictate our response. Therefore, the ultimate control lies not in avoiding pressure, but in mastering the art of reinterpretation. Learn to see pressure as a challenge, an opportunity for growth, a proving ground for your skills. Transform the narrative from one of threat to one of anticipation. View the crucible as the refiner's fire, burning away impurities and forging strength. This shift in perspective requires conscious effort, a deliberate reframing of reality. It demands vigilance against the default settings of fear and anxiety, replacing them with calculated optimism and unwavering self-belief. Embrace the discomfort, for it is within that discomfort that growth resides. Recognize that the greatest achievements are often born from the greatest pressures. Therefore, cultivate the ability to thrive in the face of adversity, to find clarity amidst chaos, and to maintain composure when others crumble. The world will relentlessly impose its demands, but the mind, when properly trained, can rise above the fray, navigating the storm with unwavering resolve. See the obstacle not as a barrier, but as a stepping stone. Welcome the pressure, for it is the sculptor's hand that shapes the masterpiece within.